Hi everyone, and welcome back to part 2 of Color with CLAldridge using Derwent Inktense. I am Christine, I am your hostess, and this is what we're working on. We're working on a page in Flowers and Dreams, and this is where we left off after part 1. If you've missed it, please do go back and have a look at it. Thank you to everyone who has commented on that video and offered their encouragement for the length of videos, for the stories that I tell. I have had a day and a half, and I'll tell you about it. But right now, I just want to get started. I need to color something now. I did try to draw. I cannot concentrate, and when I cannot concentrate on drawing, I know it's time to color something. Let's see here. What is the next item that we want to color in, and what color do we want to color it? I am thinking that in order to avoid putting my hands or arms into wet spaces, I am going to start with a green and do the leafy things up here and here and here and go for it from there. And I just have to decide what I want those things to look like. I've been loosely basing this coloring on the work of my cover artist. She did choose a solid green that has no shading, and that's not the direction I wanted to go. I want more of a nuanced green. So, oh, see, I'm already calmer. Already calmer. Give me something productive to do that is not involving bureaucrats, and I will just be delighted. I've had one of those bureaucratic dealing with the rule players, rule makers kind of day, and it sucks. So I'm going to start with apple green for an undertone. I'll almost always start with either an apple or a chartreuse green, so that I use that as my lightest shade. And then I want a true green for these, so I think I'm going to use this hooker's green right here. Rather than go into a leaf green or a fern. Well, actually, fern, they are kind of fern. No, I'm going to stick with my first choice. Apple green and hooker's green. So I always know my, oops, my apple green. This is what's, this is one of the reasons why swatching is so important, everyone. You see how this pencil right here looks like it should be the lightest shade of green in the box, but it's not. It's spring green, and this is spring green. And yet this is apple green. And it appears darker, but it's actually lighter. So this is lighter than that. But it doesn't look like it. When you look at these two, it looks like this one should be the darker one. That's why a swatch book or swatching out your colors is very important. Okay, so what did we say? We said apple green and I was coloring something else last night. I did not put my pencils back into the right order. So that just means I'm even more disorganized. Okay, water brushes. And I did change out my thing. I got it clean, but once again I was coloring something last night, so it's dirty again. You want to see what I was working on last night? I'll show you. I got this book and I said I wouldn't color in it because it's just not my style of art. And then I started on this and I'm just in love with it. I'm in love with her. I was having an insomniac night, so I made her, she's got, I have auburn hair. It's not quite that light a red, but at any rate. So I just pictured myself sleeping on this big pad of pillows, and sure enough, out I went. See, I do color art other than my own. Okay, so to the green, to the green, to the green, green, green. Apple green. I'm going to start up here, zoom you in. Okay, that looks like it's as close as it'll go. Let me take you for a ride down with that. Well, that'll work. Can everybody see? I can see, you can see, we can all see. Alright, so my day actually started with an event that happened on the Monday before the hurricane. I'm doing sort of an overall coating on this as opposed to trying to get it to flow anywhere because it's my light shade, and I'm going to add some other color to it. And so at any rate, on the Monday before the hurricane, and the hurricane got into our area after seeing it coming for days on end, on that, I want to say it was either Friday or, I think we started to feel the effects of it on Friday, but it didn't actually make landfall until Sunday, and by then it had gone fairly far south. But at any rate, the whole community was really wrapped up in hurricane preparedness. From about Tuesday, when they predicted that it might reach Virginia Beach, which is where I live, and which they started saying pretty much on Tuesday. But on Monday, the city inspector guy put a violation on my door because my grass was too long. And it got too long because the young man who mows my grass does so in his spare time and on the weekends, and it had previously rained every single weekend, and of course the last thing in the world you wanted to try and do is mow heavy wet grass. It's not good for the grass, it's not good for the person trying to mow it, it's just very difficult to do. So it got too long, and I got the violation. Well, I had 7 days to correct it. I am not able to tolerate the summer heat myself, which is why I have to hire it done. And so it took a couple days before I got somebody out here to mow the lawn. And it was actually the Saturday of the day, that was the Saturday before the hurricane hit. And it was also raining, but, you know, they said they were going to be back on Monday for an inspection, and I knew I had to get it done. So I did. What I didn't realize is that they had, at the same time, decided that my car is considered inoperable in Virginia because I rarely go anywhere, and I did not notice that the registration had expired, and the inspection sticker on the front of it had expired, and until I got something in the mail. And it said that I had 7 days to comply, and my own fault, I did not take it seriously enough. So this morning, once again, it's a government regulation. It's not like I'm driving the car on the streets without a registration. I just simply don't go anywhere. And at any rate, so they slapped this big neon orange sticker on it this morning that says they're going to tow it immediately out of my driveway. And my next door neighbor, bless his soul, because they put it in a spot that I would not have been able to see it looking out the window. So as soon as the inspector leaves, my neighbor comes rushing over, pounding. Oh, geez, were you able to see any of that? Pounding on my door, and to tell me about. Okay, now I'm going in with this green to tell me about the sticker. So now I am the person that you want with you in a crisis. If it's your crisis, I am calm, I am cool, I am collected. I can usually get whatever it is taken care of for you in short order, or at least figure out the steps necessary. In other words, I'm the calm, level-headed one in a crisis, as long as the crisis isn't mine. In my own crisis, I am a basket case. And and this crisis was no different. At any rate, so I came rushing in. Of course, So I tried to renew the registration online, but which in Virginia you can do. Unfortunately, because it had expired more than 90 days ago, you have to go into a DMV office. In order to go into the DMV office, you have to go with all of this paperwork. So I had the insurance card, I've got the title, I had to fill out a new application because I've got vanity plates on it. So I had to fill out a new application asking, saying that I would like to please keep my plates, but all I need are the stickers. And on the list, it says that you have to have, in order to re-register it, you have to have a valid city or DMV state inspection. So I know that I'm not technically allowed to move the car without registration. But I decided to just see if I could run up to the Jiffy Lube and let them do a quick oil change and an inspection. Well, it's not that easy. Apparently, in Virginia, some time ago, many of the inspectors stopped doing inspections because the state, or the Commonwealth, because Virginia is not a state, it is a Commonwealth. There are only 3 Commonwealths in America. Virginia is one, Kentucky is one, and I want to say that Massachusetts is one. But I could be wrong. It could be a different state. I know it's one of the northern states. But there's only 3 Commonwealths. All the rest are states. but we just refer to them all collectively as the United States of America. And so apparently nobody, at least none of the places that I went to seven places. Nobody was doing inspections, or if they did, they couldn't do one today. I'd have to leave the car overnight, or all day. It might be a couple days. One has inspectors, but he only comes in on Wednesdays and Saturdays. And of course, the dealership for the car is over in Norfolk, which is a freeway trip. And the last thing in the world I want to do is take an unregistered, I mean, these other places were neighborhood places, or, you know, places within a mile of my house. But the dealership is kind of far away. But they do have an inspector all the time. So now I have, to make a really, I was unable to get an inspection. Now I still have this, you know, got this huge neon sticker on the back of the car. People are looking at me a little strange. So I am, at this point in time, you know, afraid to stay out on the roadways, beside which it's against the law. All I need is for a cop to spy that sticker, and I'm in bigger trouble than that. And, okay, so now we'll do the magic. Now, the irony is that if I were able to get the car behind a fence or cover it up with shrubbery or something along those lines, it would not be a problem. And once again, I have a 2008 vehicle. It has, I looked, 9,580 miles on it. I've had it for over 10 years. And haven't even put 10,000 miles on it. So that gives you an idea of how much I actually leave the house. I mean, I'm certainly not agoraphobic. I do leave the house. I just don't really have any need to. Occasional lunch with a friend or something like that. But I live kind of close to a downtown area that's got lots of restaurants. It's really a walkable community. It's not that big a deal. So I spent my day dealing with that. And eventually I just ended up having to, I backed the car along the side of the house, and I put a copy of the renewal the renewal notice thingy, a copy of the insurance card in the windshield, and then I also put a note. And the note said, "I'm trying, guys. I really am." And now I actually have an appointment at the dealership tomorrow morning, and I have a temporary movement permit, which you can get online, which I did not know about beforehand. But so I'm legal. I'll go tomorrow and get my little inspection and present my little self at the DMV. And sorry about the spin. And but yeah, it's just, rules are important, and I understand that. We live in a society of laws. Rules are important, and we all agree to live by those rules. And so I should have paid better attention, but I did not. And so that's how my day went. I certainly had not planned my day that way. I was going to go do something else. Oh, and for good measure, while he was here putting the sticker on my car, he decided that he didn't like the condition of the rain gutter on the right side of my house. So, but I have 30 days for that. So, once they start on you, they are just relentless. Best to let them stay away. Don't ever give them a reason to come mow your lawn. Of course, if I'd have tried to mow it myself, they'd have just found me dead in the front yard. Because the heat just, the humidity makes it so I can't breathe. Okay. Oops. I apologize. What has happened is I've sort of turned the camera too close to myself. Let me move you back just a tad so that I can move the book up. That way, hopefully I won't get off screen quite so often. And I can literally feel my blood pressure coming down. Which is always a good thing. Okay, now let's go for these. I appreciate all the people who commented that the length of a video doesn't really matter because you have full control of the pause button and can watch it in pieces, and that is exactly how I watch most of the videos that I watch. And I love that YouTube has that continue watching feature. Things that I can comfortably reach. Ironically enough, in excuse me, in January, we had a big snowstorm, and it was cold here. And I had walked up to the 7-Eleven. I was wearing my snow boots, and I had all of my gear on and gloves and the whole 9 yards. But our street does not get plowed, and it was so cold that after the first few vehicles went over it and crushed the snow, it became a sheet of ice that just kept getting slicker and slicker as this cold snap continued day after day after day after day. Because the sun would shine on it, melt just the top layer, and then refreeze again at night, which turned it to literally a sheet of ice. And I did try to walk up to the 7-Eleven, and I slipped and fell. And when I did, I landed on my knee and my left wrist, and I broke my wrist. I've ever in my life. And I don't know where I was going with that. As with most of my stories about me, they disappear pretty quickly. I don't usually hang on to that kind of stuff. Oh, crisis management, that was it. So my first thought as I heard it snap was, you've got to get out of the street, because if a car comes along, it's going to run you over. It won't be able to stop. So I managed to, and of course, being older, getting up from the ground is not as easy as it used to be when I was 25. And so I knew I didn't have the assist of my hands. But I managed to get up. I had fallen on my knee as well. I got up and I actually limped home, got the key in the doorknob, and promptly passed out on the way in the door from the adrenaline rush. And but after that, I was calm as a cucumber. Absolutely calm as a cucumber. Obviously, I woke up from... I mean, it wasn't like I passed out for any length of time. It was more just... I got so dizzy I had to sit down and close my eyes. And just sort of concentrate until I could be alert enough to try and get my glove off and see just how... my glove and my coat, and see just how bad the damage was. And it, fortunately, it did not look that bad. But it was definitely broken. So I was in a brace forever, it seemed like, but it seems to have healed up just fine. And so now I have that in my experience bag, my bag of experiences. I don't wish it on anybody. Broken bones are not a nice thing, especially not in your wrist. I'm just glad it was not. It was my left wrist and not my right hand, because then I'd be out of business too. Okay. Oh, that looks beautiful. I love Inktense. Thank you to the person who commented on authors. Actually, there was more than one. I am, like I said, have been an avid reader at most points in my life. There is, and I'll read anything. It doesn't... I especially like... I used to go to the bargain counter at, or the bargain table at Barnes & Noble, and it provided the book sounded interesting. The thicker it was, the happier I was. The more pages. I think I'm going to do the same thing with the can I reach those? Yeah, I can. Let's go over here and do these right now while we're in here. I have to remember that I'm using Inktense and not a regular pencil. So I don't know who a lot of the newer authors are. I just know that the ones that I love seem to be classics. Like, for instance, and maybe one of the few of you who has read Will and Ariel Durant's The Story of Civilization from start to finish and was absolutely fascinated by it. If you've never seen it, it's 10 volumes. Each one is about 3 inches wide, and it's on tissue paper print, and it took Will and Ariel Durant a lifetime to write them. And they are a study of the history of civilization from the time of the earliest known time of human beings all the way through to modern time, which for them would have been probably post-war, post-World War II. And it's a fascinating read. It's one of those. My mother is the one who turned me on to reading when I was just a tiny girl. And as a matter of fact, that was when she really wanted me to behave myself. She would say that if I didn't behave myself, that she wouldn't leave me her books, or that if I let anything happen to her books whenever I would use one, that she would come back and haunt me for the rest of my life. So those were her two threats: books as reward and books as punishment. But she definitely pushed my buttons. I think I may have mentioned in an earlier video that I love paper. I don't know what it is about paper. I just happen to love it. And I think that paper is just such an invention. It used to be, of course, before there was a printing press, that all books had to be hand copied. But when you think about it, where did the first papers come from? And people used tanned animal skins. Then, of course, the sort of goes to the worst crime that's ever been committed was the burning of the library at Alexandria, because there was a wealth of knowledge in there that we'll never have and may never be rediscovered. Maybe that's why I love paper so much, because it's fragile. It can be harmed. I just want to protect it. Like Mitch Albom's book being in the Dollar General. I was just compelled to take it home and take care of it. Seems like an odd thing to be compelled to do. Jeez. I have not been paying attention, guys. I hope that you can see this. I don't really want to scrap these videos. It takes too long to process them and get them up. That one that was an hour and 40 minutes took about 4 hours to render out of my video editor. Of course, I'm rendering them at a really good quality, but my system is set up for art, not high technology, so, and that's the way I want it. But I just went and did some laundry and a little shopping, cooked some things for the week, so that I wouldn't have to cook again. What I call shortcutting. Whoops. Now that is an interesting, look at that. There's now I've known this since I got them. There is a crack in this pencil that cause it's broken right about here, and it causes it to come out like that. And it's only this one pencil. But let's see what we can do about that. I could write to Derwent. I could basically moan about a defect in a pencil, or I could apply a little initiative fix it and be done with it, because that is how I roll. I don't have time for things that don't work, and I've never met a broken thing I can't fix, or a workaround I can't find. Just have to remember that's there when I go to sharpen it. I'll have to watch the blades on the sharpener. Make sure I don't gum them all up with tape residue. But if I do, that'll just be another problem to find a workaround on. There is no such thing as a crisis that is not fixable, or a substitution that can't be made, or a invention that can't be created in a... I always like to think I'm channeling MacGyver in those moments. That was one of my absolute favorite shows. There was just virtually nothing he couldn't make out of a paperclip. I like that show Scorpion for exactly the same reason. They, I mean, as implausible as the scenarios are, I absolutely love genius. I love people who solve problems creatively. They don't run around with their hair cut out, or run around with their hair on fire. They just fix it. I dumped a bunch of stuff on the floor when I grabbed that tape. Just having a quick look-see to make sure that there's no pencil down there that I'm going to roll my office chair over. That would be a difficult fix. That's funny. These are tiny, so I'm just going to... Whoops. Now, actually, we're just going to choose a different green for these little tiny bits. I'll choose one that's reasonably sharp so that I don't have to choose a vivid green so that I don't have to encounter the... Whoops. I don't know why I chose to do those right now, but I did. It's a pretty green. Trying to shade these tiny little places is near impossible, so I don't bother trying to do that. Okay. Alrighty. I was trying to think. Okay. I think I told you all about my first job, of course, was helping my mother with her bookkeeping business. My second job I got when I was 16, and actually, I was 15, and no, I had to have been 16. I was an only child. I was raised as an only child of a second family. My father had an ex-wife and 2 daughters that lived in another state, and then I was the only child of his marriage to my mother. And consequently, I had the advantage of proximity in that my dad and I lived in the same state, so I certainly got to see him more often than any of the others. And I think that I want to do these. How about like a yellow and tangerine for these? Keeping it in the yellow, but also maybe bringing in a bit of the orange. I think that might be very pretty. Let's give it a try and find out. Okay. I've got those out. Let's pick a nice sunny yellow. A golden yellow, which I believe is what we used down here. So we'll use a nice golden yellow. Kind of put a little down there, and then just the very, very light up here. And I'm just putting it right in the center between those dots, because I'm going to make the orange kind of flow around it. So I was a spoiled kid. I'll be the first to admit that. On my 16th birthday, hold on to your horses, my dad gave me, it was 1974? No, 5. Yeah, it was 1975. I was 16. And on my 16th birthday, my dad gave me a 1966 Mustang Fastback. My dad, after the military, had gone into the auto body business. And so he used to get access to vehicles that had been totaled. Because of his business, he was in a position to fix them. And he always had them, he always had one going in the garage at home. And he would fix them up, rebuild them basically from scratch, and then sell them for a little profit on the side. So he had built this particular 66 Mustang for our across the street neighbor, who gave it to his daughter, and she got into an accident with it, and poor thing, it nearly killed her, and the car was totaled again. So he rebuilt it a second time and gave it to me. And I was no more responsible than she was. And I kept trying to drive it like it was a race car. And this is Tangerine. And men who are watching will understand this. I blew the head and exhaust manifold gaskets in it 3 times. The third time that it happened, or the second time that it happened, after my dad fixed it, because when you blow the head gasket, it involves pulling the engine apart because you have to put a new gasket in. It has to do with the compression and it's a really important thing to not mess about with. But it was an automatic, and I kept wanting to drive it like it was a stick. And that's what kept doing it. And so after the second time that it happened, he said, if it happens again, just call me and tell me where my car is. He says, because I won't be fixing it for you one more time. And sure enough, within a couple of months, I was calling him and telling him where he could find his car in Newport Beach, along the strip, along the beach. I had already called my mother, so I was safely out of his reach. But I was without a car, and so my mother was trying to drive me to work, and this goes back to that second job. And I grew up in a place called Lake Arrowhead, and we lived on one side of the lake, and the lake is huge, and the place where I worked, which was a Mexican restaurant, was on the other side of the lake. So about probably 2 weeks of having to drive me to work, and she bought me another car. Like I say, I was a spoiled brat. I know it. I admit it. I have grown up a lot since then, but I was a fairly rebellious and irresponsible kid. And but my job there was as a sopapilla maker. If you've never had a sopapilla, they are a little slice of heaven. They are fried dough that get if you have done the recipe right, fried it at just the right temperature, it puffs up and makes a hole in the middle so it's hollow, and then you fill that hole with honey. And so that was my second job at 16. And because the family who owned it was one of only about 3 authentically hail from Mexico families in the area that I grew up, the food was just fabulous, and you get to actually eating genuine, real Mexican food, which is, if I have to say that I miss anything at all about California, it was having access to real Mexican food, because it is not like that in any other place other than Mexico. And it happens to be my absolute favorite kind of food. Although I like Ethiopian food too. My parents actually met and married in Ethiopia. My mother was worked for the diplomatic corps of the United States, and she was in Ethiopia administering an aid program, and my dad was there after World War II and after Korea, because he was in both World War II and Korea. He flew bombers. He flew bombers. He was there flying for Ethiopian Airlines, which at the time was a wholly owned subsidiary of TWA, which was one of the big airlines at the time. They are since out of business. Went the same direction as Pan Am. So I'm just putting the tangerine around the outer edges. You can see how much of it actually pulls in. That will dry and it'll be a little less, at least I hope it'll be. Otherwise, it's just a pretty color anyway. And so they met and they got married in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. And that, you should see their what I have it somewhere, but their marriage certificate. It's just so cool because it's actually written in two ways. It's written in Arabic, which is one I believe they speak Arabic, but they also speak Swahili, which is the language of the country. And it's a very cool document. I actually, and then it's also, of course, written in English, because they got married on the, got married at the magistrate, but they had to have everything approved through the U.S. Embassy. And then when they knew they were expecting me, they came home. Because as interesting as it is to be in a foreign country, it's not necessarily the place where you want to have your children born. See, I told you I had some interesting tales, people. How many of us can say we were conceived in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia? My mother used to tell me she had sprung into the world fully grown, and I never needed to know anything other than that. Huh. Any wonder why we had a troubled relationship? And my father, on the other hand, because he had, bless his soul, he had a drinking problem, which he solved. He finally, after many years, got sober when I was 2. So not only did I have the advantage of proximity to my father, I also, it could be said, had an entirely different father than who he had been in his first marriage. And I was 5 when he married wife number 3, and the one that would actually stick forever, who is my stepmother, who is just beloved, and I miss her very much. She passed away in 2000. But because of him, I grew up kind of literally in the arms of the people who go to 12-step programs, and one of the major tenets is that it is mandatory to be honest with yourself and deal with your life. And so my mother telling me that she had sprung into existence with no history never quite struck me as being honest, and I think might have been the root of much of because I really came to value the honesty that you find in a AA meeting. It's one of the reasons why I don't, I kind of, it's how I relate to people. I relate to people by their stories. I am able to empathize with people by their stories. And if they're not willing to tell stories, or, if they're embarrassed, or, I mean, heck, everybody in the world makes mistakes. We all, we all screw up. But if you keep screwing up over and over and over again, and don't, at least make the effort, then you might be a lost cause. But if you do, then you should be, after a length of time, be forgiven. And so at any rate, I'll tell you more about my mother's story much further along in the line. Let's just say she was an excellent mother who took very good care of a wayward daughter and gave her the greatest gifts of reading, of a work ethic, of oh my goodness. My mother could knit and crochet and just make the most gorgeous things. She was one of those that used to, take the tiny, tiny, tiny knitting needles and hand make the intarsia sweater that had the complex pattern where all the threads cross behind as you're knitting along. It's what they do with a machine now. She could do it not only without a machine, but she could draw her own charts. And she sewed. She always sewed clothes for my dolls. And and of course she sewed clothes for me too, but it was primarily my dolls. That's a pretty color. I like the fact that it's picking up the orange here, and we'll do a little more with that. I'm less good at color balancing than my friend Virginia, but we shall see. Okay, now, as long as we're here, let's go put the yellow down for this band. Okay. So when I worked for Tony's store, when you were a kid growing up in Lake Arrowhead, you worked for one of four places. You either worked at the skating rink, and this was long before it was an Olympic training facility, which it is now. It was just a local skating rink back then. And growing up, I skated all winter long. My mother had visions of the Olympics, which I never shared. Since I was the one that had to do the thing, I was not going to share them. Trying to find what color did we use? We used amber, I believe, for the gold effect in our first video. So we'll go back to using amber now. Trying to remember to check to make sure I'm still on screen before I make these turns. And y'all said it was okay if I turned the book, so I'm going to take it your word and turn the book. There's something that happened when I moved to the South, because Virginia is technically the South. Did you know that Virginia sided with the Confederacy in the Civil War? I didn't either. How I ended up here in Virginia it's not even a long story. But it does go back to, I'll weave my story together for you. How about that? We'll come forward. I was 42, and it was after 9/11, and I made the decision along with my spouse to end our relationship. It was very amicable, and he didn't think it would be, which still just floors me. I was like, well, what did you think was going to happen? That I was going to throw a fit? I made it really easy, you know. And, because who wants to be with somebody that doesn't want to be with you? And I always tell people this. When you are breaking up with somebody, remember that there was a time that you loved them, and try and remember that. And treat each other accordingly. Because, you know, I could have gotten mad, or I was sad, of course, but I could have gotten angry. I had every right to get angry. But that doesn't do me or anyone else any good. And as my aunt would point out to me a couple of years later, but this was before she passed away too, it wasn't so much my heart that was broken as my ego that was bruised. And I thought, you know, that is really true. Because it had been over for a really long time. It was just, you know, two people hanging on for lack of a better option. For him, a better option came along. For me, it had not. One or the other of us would have made the move eventually. So that's how I ended up out here in the South. I was living in Nevada, and I was just... I put a fresh start on my list of things to do, and thought that this was the right place to do it. As it turned out, it was a very wrong-headed decision made out of love, but I came out here to try and get to know my two sisters from my dad's first marriage better. But I didn't bother asking them, and they didn't really want to know me better, so there was that, which we live and we learn. They would just as soon I had stayed out west where I belong. But I did pick up the y'all living here, and I kind of like it. Y'all is there's all y'all. Y'all is singular, and all y'all is plural, and y'all is also plural. but I think it's a charming colloquialism. Is that what that is? I'll have to look that word up in the dictionary later, see if I used it properly. Lord only knows I didn't. Okay, how about some fuchsia? This is something I do not know if I can do with a water brush, but we are going to try it. The worst thing that can happen is I can fail. I do, you know what, maybe. No, let's do it. Let's do it and see how we do it. When I highlight pearls, I like to use the white space that is in the paper as opposed to putting in a white Posca or a jelly roll or something like that. So I usually will draw a circle where I think I want the light to hit it. And that automatically forms a little highlight. And do you see, oh, actually, I hope you just saw that. If you didn't, I'll show it to you again. But what I've done is I'm pulling the pigment right off the pencil, so it's much more intense. It's going to be harder to do as we get into those tinier ones, so I just sort of let it go in most of those. Concentrating, concentrating. And if I mess it up, then I can come in and hit it with a white jelly roll. It will be interesting to see how that looks halfway good from here. We'll just have to see. See if I can do it on the other side. I'm not sure that putting it in the center is the proper thing, but it just seems like kind of the most convenient place, considering that this is not the most precise of instruments. Although it's a water brush tip is a fair bit finer than a watercolor marker. Ooh, Dee Dee got some happy mail today that was a set of these very, very cool brushes to use with her pan pastels. I caught about 10 minutes of her show right before the panic started earlier. With the whole car episode. I don't know if I am the only one for whom this is true, but I may not drive my car, but I have to know I have to know that it's there. I have to know that it's available, which is one of the reasons why I haven't sold it. It'd probably be cheaper if I just left off the insurance and took an Uber whenever I want to leave the house. But I need to know that if something happened in the middle of the night, that I can go somewhere. It's a freedom issue for me, I think, having a vehicle. And ever since I was a little kid, really, the idea of not being able to travel or not being able to transport myself from point A to point B is a source of anxiety. And I don't know what that stems from. I don't think I was ever trapped anywhere. Unable to get away or whatever. It's just a bizarre way of being. It's just something sort of learned to accept it. Okay, how about these yellow flowers down here next? We'll make them the same pretty tangerine-y orange. And then I think I'll leave off this particular video for two reasons. One, to try and keep the videos just a little bit shorter. And because I do actually have some things that I had planned to do today that are needing my attention. And if I left off hanging in the middle of this story, I'll come back to it, because I do watch the video before I post it, so I can make little notes for myself that, you know. I was a little concerned the other night that I had said something that might be considered offensive to somebody. And then I decided that I really hadn't. So that was good. That means that the internal editor is it's working a little, at any rate. Lord only knows that if I said everything that I think, sometimes I would get myself in more trouble. And I love this. It's starting to come together. It's starting to feel really good. You know, this part up here, and that's making me really happy. It's making me not want to stop. Occurs to me that this light over here is off. I don't know that it helps over here, but it sort of helps me feel like it's starting to get dark outside now. Well, actually, it's already full dark. And, oh, hang on. I should do this side too. What time is it? Oh, it's early. It's only 7:30. Only 7:30. Of course, it was light when I started, so I have no idea what time it got dark. Trying to think. Whoops. There I went again. Okay. Let's make magic. Our Derwent art magic. One of the ways that I fund my art supplies is I do a lot of those survey things where they reward you with $5 Amazon gift cards. And so if you do a few of those, say, every 5 weeks, I get to order $25 worth of Amazon gift card, or Amazon. I get to spend $25 on Amazon is what I'm saying. So Deb, if you're watching, the home cube markers are already in my cart. I'm just... He did a review on the home cube markers and demonstrated them. They look like they're wonderful. I am not a marker girl. I have never felt the need to use markers, but he said that they were really good, and I've been watching a lot of Anne over at, I'm a fruit bat, and so, which is how I got started on this whole YouTube thing. This whole YouTube thing is Anne Sigger's fault. because she asked me to be an artist. Oh, that's what I wanted to tell everybody. If you don't already know, I am the featured artist in this month's issue of Color On magazine. If you go to the Facebook group, you can just go to, I believe it's www.coloronmagazine. No, it might be maniacalconfessions.com. They all go to the same place, I believe, but coloronmagazine.com, all one word. And if you're a Facebook member, you can find out about it by going to the group Coloring Books for Adults, and it's the big group, the one with like the 47,000 members. So it's easy to pick out if you get presented with a whole bunch of like name groups. It's the big one, and but they are the people behind Color On magazine. And they contacted me and asked me if I was interested in being the featured artist for December. So I created 5 drawings for them that are exclusive to the magazine. You won't see them anywhere else, and I've agreed not to sell them in my Etsy shop. So the only place to get them, at least until next year, is through the September issue of Color On magazine. And I'll try and leave a link in this video for the website. They also, it's an e-magazine, so you can't go out to a newsstand and pick up a copy of it, but you can go and get a PDF version of it, either through a subscription, and they're actually less expensive if you subscribe for 3 months, but even at that, it's not very much money. To just buy one issue is $3.99. I think it's $3.99. And so it's got my drawings. There are a couple of other artists that are represented that aren't features but are contributors for this month. each of those submitted 2 drawings. Pardon me. So there is lots to color in this magazine, all for the one low price. And so I did want to mention that. I also am one of the featured artists this month in the Facebook group, The Cracked Crayon, and their logo is Broken Crayons Color 2, and that is a group that is adminned by a dear soul, Shelley Durham, and her team of moderators, and it is just a really fun group. They have a sister group that is all about coloring supplies. That's the name of that group, and you can access it right from the announcements portion of their. When you go into the group, there's an announcements place. So I wanted to say about that. And that's really all the news that's fit to tell. Garrison Keillor used to say that. I am going to go ahead and stop here. This is part 2 of Coloring with Derwent Inktense by yours truly, Christine at CLAldridge Art. Until part 3, take care of yourselves and color something pretty. Thanks for watching.